Hey everybody, how's it going? My name's Paul. I started the DiceyReview.com. Tonight we're going to be going over the 1 to 5 player game Terraforming Mars by Stronghold Games and Fryx Games. This is an awesome 1 to 5 player tile placement, hand management / drafting, if you use a variant, game that has a ton of replayability, a ton of depth and strategy. So let's go ahead and see how we set the game up, and then we'll talk about the different actions that you can take and what we're trying to do in the game. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is obviously set the board out in the middle of the table. There's also going to be a ton of cards. There are a lot in this game. These are the cards for the standard game, and I'll go over at the end of the video the cards for the corporate era game, the more advanced game. For this video, we're just going to start with the standard game that gives everybody kind of an even playing field to start off with. It makes it a little bit simpler. So you'll take all of these cards, shuffle them up, and then place them next to the board. And the next thing that you'll want to do is get the resource cubes that are used in the game and place them somewhere near the board. There are all these really cool metallic resources that will stand for a number of different things in the game, depending on where you place them on your player board. And they will be in 1, 5, and 10, increments of 1, 5, and 10. So you'll place these close to the board with an easy reach of all the players. Alright, so the next thing we're going to want to do is set up some of the tiles. A large majority of the tiles that you get in the game are these double-sided city and greenery tiles. So you'll want to place a supply of those next to the board that players can access and put cities and greenery out on the board. There are also these special tiles that can be activated by different players depending on what cards they draw. You want to place those somewhere near the board just in case they come up. And the last type of tile that you'll see are these blue ocean tiles. There are exactly 9 of them, and there's actually a designated space on the board where you'll place them right up here. There's going to be 3 chunky white cubes included with the game, and these are to keep track of the rounds and also to keep track of the temperature on the planet and the oxygen on the planet. 2 of the cubes will go on the 0 spaces of these 2 tracks, and the other cube will go on the number 1 space down here, indicating that it's the first round of the game, and this will move as players play. Now each player is also going to have a number of colored cubes that will match their player color. I like to pick green usually, so I'm going to take a selection of these. What you'll do is you'll take one of these cubes and place it on the 20 TR spot on the board, the terraforming rating. That's your points throughout the game. And then the rest of these will be used on your player board and as you place tiles on the board to show that you have control of those tiles. So we'll just place a supply of those next to our player board. Alright, and speaking of our player board, we're going to go ahead and set it up. So to start off, we place it somewhere where we can have easy access to it, and then we're going to start with 1 production of every type of resource. Now there are 6 resources in the game, and the production of the resource is how much of that resource you'll generate every round that you can use. So what you'll do to indicate that is you'll take one of your cubes and place them on the 1 of every space on the player board. And once again, this shows that you are going to generate resources every round. This doesn't show how many you can spend, but it will show how many generate that you can then spend. And we'll go over that in more detail before we actually get into the actions of the game. The next thing you'll want to do for the standard game is give each player a beginner corporation. This just tells you how much money you start with, how many mega credits, and how many cards you draw at the start of the game. You'll place this somewhere near your player board to remind you. And then you can also give some of the players some of these reference cards. They'll talk about the different rounds within the game, some rules about tile placement, just general questions, and then game end and scoring tips. And you can place those somewhere near your player board just in case you need to reference those at any time. Alright, and the last thing that you'll want to do before you start to draw some cards and look at your hand is give somebody the first player token, and you're ready to draw your starting hand. Now in the standard game, each player is going to start with 42 mega credits, and they're going to start with 10 cards. So what you'll do is you'll take some of these cubes that stand for 10, you'll place them inside of your mega credits window right here. This shows that you have 42 credits available to spend. And then after that, you'll take 10 cards, and that will be your starting hand, and you'll get those for free. So before we actually get into the actions, I want to talk a little bit about the player board and a little bit about the cards, just so you'll have a better understanding of the actions when we're actually explaining them later, because a lot of them revolve around these two components of the game. Alright, so first and foremost, let's talk about our player board. This is going to be the spot where we will keep track of all of our resources, all of the things that we produce every round, and this kind of gives us an idea of what we can spend and what we can do on our turns. So just as a general rule, there are 2 spaces for each section of your player board. There are 6 sections depicting some different resources that you have. The one section is the production of the certain resource, so this is this track up here that you mark with your player cube, and then the other section is this little area right here that shows the available resources that you have to spend. As a general rule, at the end of every round there's going to be a production phase where you will produce resources within these windows based on what your track shows. At the start of the game, we all have a production of 1, meaning that at the end of the round, we are going to produce 1 of each of these resources that we can then spend later in the round to perform actions or discount cards and things like that. Now, the only exception to this are mega credits and energy. What happens at the end of every round is before you produce, any stored energy becomes heat, and then you produce more energy. So if you don't use energy throughout the round, it will become heat. And you can actually use heat to take an action on the board, so that's not a bad thing. The other exception are mega credits. So the way mega credits work is you will take your TR rating, your victory point rating on the track, and then add any production that you have, and that's how much money you get every round. So in the starting example, we all start with 20 points. So we would produce 20 mega credits plus the 1 on our production track for a total of 21 mega credits. And that's how the production works. And then, like I said, once these resources are produced, we can spend them in the round to take actions and play cards. So now that we've talked about the production on our player board and how that works, let's talk about the cards and just generally what they look like and how you will play them. Alright, so the majority of what you're going to be doing in this game is generated by the cards that you'll play from your hand. So we want to talk a little bit about what the cards look like, how they're made up, and just the general requirements on the cards that you have to meet or pay before you can play them. Just as a general rule, there are 3 types of cards. There are red event cards. Those will be a one-time use card that you play and then you put face down off to the side of your player board. Sometimes they'll generate in-game points, but for the most part they do one thing that's good and then you're done with them. There are green cards right here. These will be played face up in front of you, and they will generate specific tag bonuses up throughout the rest of the game, and we'll explain tags and kind of what they mean in a little bit. They'll usually do a one-time thing for you as well that's pretty good. The last thing that you'll see, there are blue cards. These blue cards will be played face up in front of you, and they'll usually provide some type of lasting benefit or an action that you can take throughout the game. You can take an action on a blue card once per generation or round, and a lot of times it'll be something like, you know, put a cube on this card, and for every 2 cubes at the end of the game you get a victory point. This one actually says, as an action you can add 1 animal to this card, and an animal is a cube. And then it says at the end of the game, you get a victory point for every animal on this card. Also, when you play the card, you get to decrease your plant production 1 step, but increase your mega credit production 2 steps. So there's kind of some one-time benefits this card gives you, as well as lasting benefits throughout the game that it'll give you as well. So those are the 3 different types of cards that you can play. Also, when you look at these cards, there are going to be some requirements and some costs to actually play them. So for instance, if you look at the top left of each card, there's going to be a mega credit number in this yellow box. That's the initial cost that you have to pay just simply to play the card. So you would have to pay our mega credits before you can play the card. So this one would cost 35, this one would cost 13, etc. And then on some cards, there's also going to be some minimum or maximum requirements as well. You can see right here, it says that before you play this card, it has to be there has to be 9% oxygen in the atmosphere. So before you can even play this card, it has to be kind of later in the game because the oxygen track has to reach a certain percentage. The other thing to note is that sometimes there will be tags on these cards that will give you certain bonuses. So you can see up in the top right of the card, there's all these little symbols. And there's a symbol right there, there's a symbol right here. They all have different meanings. Some cards will tell you that you can't play a specific card until you have 3 or 4 science tags out, and that's what a science tag looks like right there. Some cards will tell you you get victory points for every earth tag that you have, and that's an earth tag right there. There's also some bonuses that you can get in the game if you have a certain number of tags in front of you, so that's another thing to look for. As a general rule, also on the card, a lot of them will increase or decrease some of your production, or give you a one-time benefit of some type of resource. What you're going to look for is down here on the bottom of the card. These are the decrease or increase of goods that will happen. And if there are symbols in a brown box like this, that means that you're going to increase or decrease your production. This one, for instance, says the temperature, it must be negative 14 degrees or colder, but you get to increase your plant production 2 steps. So when you play this card, you would get to move this cube up from 1, 2 to 3. And that means that every round you would produce 3 plants in that box. And that's really good. So this one is is a great card, and it has a couple of tags that may give you bonuses later in the game. That's a really good card. The other type of symbol that you might see is a resource that's not within a brown box. That gives you that resource instantly to spend. It doesn't increase your production, it just gives you those resources that you can use immediately. So this card right here says gain 2 plants, raise oxygen level 1 step, and place an ocean tile on the board. So that card right there is going to do a lot for you. It's going to let you place 2 it's going to let you place a tile on the board and then increase one of the tracks. It's going to give you 2 plants that you can use. This is a great card. This one's really good. So just in general, whenever you see the symbols without a brown box around them, that means that you get the good instantly. You don't increase your production of that good. And that's kind of how the cards will read. The cards also have this really great text box down below them that goes step by step and explains what is what the effect of the card is. So if you don't want to memorize all these symbols, a lot of times you just have to read the bottom of the card and it'll tell you what to do. I really like that about the game. The last thing to mention, there are some of these cards that will show a resource with a red box around it. That means that you can target another player and take resources from them. Now this is optional, you don't have to do this, but it is in the game that you can be a little bit mean to other players and kind of pull them back a little bit and try and stop them from progressing. So now that we've talked about the cards, we've talked about the player boards, we're ready to look at the main board and go through the different actions that you can take and the phases within the game. Alright, the first 2 phases of the game are the player order phase and the research phase. That's where the player marker will pass to the left, and the research phase is where you'll draw some cards that you can purchase and put in your hand. But those 2 phases are skipped for the first round or the first generation of the game. So what we're going to do is we're going to go straight into the player action phase, and this is the meat of the game. This is where players will take actions until they can't take any more actions. On your turn, you can take either 1 or 2 actions, and there are a lot of different actions that you can take. So we'll go into detail about which actions that you can take. There are some that you can take on the board, there are some that you can take from playing cards, so we will go ahead and talk about the cards first. So the first action that you can take in the game is play a card from your hand. You can do this 1 or 2 times, and we've already talked about cards and kind of how they work, so we'll go ahead and skip talking about cards until we talk about playing tiles later and just maybe how they'll relate to that. But that's the first action that you can take on your turn. Next action that you can take on your turn is called using a standard project. Standard projects, they're listed on the player board, or on the main board rather, and there are a number of different things that you can do, and mainly they are done by paying money. But the first thing that you can do is you can sell patents, and that means that you can discard any number of cards from your hand and gain a mega credit for each card. So for instance, if I discarded 5 cards, I would get 5 mega credits that I could then use instantly. That's one action that you can take. The other action that you can take is you can pay $11 to increase your power, your energy production by 1. That means that you would produce more energy every round. For 14 mega credits, you can increase the temperature by 1 step on the track. For 18, you can place an ocean tile. For 23, you can place a greenery tile. And for 25 mega credits, you can place a city on the board and also increase your mega credit production by 1. Those are the different standard projects that you can do. The next thing that you can do as a standard project is claim a milestone. Now these are one-time in-game bonuses that will give you points for achieving certain things within the game. Only 3 of these 5 milestones can be claimed throughout the game, and each time you claim a milestone you have to pay 8 mega credits to do so. But when doing that you get 5 victory points or terraforming rating at the end of the game for claiming those milestones. So what you would do is you would have to meet some requirements, and then you would pay your mega credits and get one of these milestones. So for instance, this one on the left over here says you have to have reached 35 on the TR track. If you have done that, you can pay 8 mega credits and then place one of your control cubes there to show that you have claimed that milestone. Then at the end of the game you're going to have 5 more points to show for it. Right here, this one says if you have 3 city tiles on the board that you control, you can claim that milestone. This one, if you have 3 greenery tiles on the board, you can claim that milestone. Right here, this one says that if you have 8 different unique city tags out in play, or city tags, just tags in general out in play, you can claim that milestone. So for instance, these different tags on the different buildings, you would have to have 8 unique tags in play that you've already played from your hand. Then you would be able to go and claim the builder milestone. The last thing that you can do is take the planner milestone. Now the planner is for a person who has 16 cards in their hand at one time. They can then claim that milestone. There is no hand limit, so this is definitely possible, especially if you buy a lot of cards every round. So that's the planner milestone. The next thing that you can do on your turn is you can fund an award. Now awards are similar to milestones, but instead of claiming them instantly, you're basically just activating these awards to be paid out at the end of the game for whoever has the most in a certain category. So awards are funded in a similar way to milestones. You have to pay mega credits to fund them. First person who comes here can fund an award for 8 mega credits, the second person can fund it for 14, and the third person that comes here can fund it for 20 mega credits. And what you're doing is you're activating categories to be scored at the end of the game. If you come here and you fund the Landlord Award, whoever has the most tiles under their control at the end of the game will get 5 victory points. Whoever is second will get 2 victory points. This one right here says whoever's mega credit production is the highest will get the points. Whoever has the most scientist tags out in play, the science tags, will get this one. Whoever has the most heat cubes on their player board, who has produced the most heat, will get that award right there. And then this one says whoever has produced the most steel and titanium on their player board will get that point right there. So that's funding an award. They don't get scored unless somebody activates them, and whoever activates them is not necessarily going to win. Alright, the next action that you can take is using the action on one of your blue cards. And as I said, there are 2 types of blue cards in the game. There are blue cards that will provide some type of lasting bonus that's just active all the time passively, and then there are blue cards that will allow you to take an action. This one, for instance, right here, the Arctic Algae, says that whenever someone places an ocean tile, you gain 2 plants that you can then spend immediately. This one right here, however, says that as an action, you can add 1 animal cube to this card. At the end of the game, for every animal cube that is on this card, you're going to gain an extra victory point. So, as an action, you can add a cube to this card once per round. what you would do is you could add one of the cubes to show that you've got another animal, and then you would place a player cube down here on the bottom of it to show that you used it this round, and you can't use it again until the next generation. That's the next action that you can take. The next action that you can take is you can spend 8 of your heat or 8 of your plants to place a tile on the board or increase one of the tracks on the board and gain victory points. The first thing you can do is you can spend 8 heat to raise the temperature on the planet by 1 step. What you would do is you would move this cube up along the track by 1 step, and then you would get to increase your TR rating by 1. This means that you have 1 more point at the end of the game, and it also means that you're going to generate more mega credits every round, because if you remember, you generate your TR rating plus your mega credit production in your player board for money every round. So that's what spending heat allows you to do. If you spend 8 plants, you get to take a greenery tile and place it on the board. Now we'll talk about placing tiles in detail after we've discussed this last action, but for now you'll just know that generally you take one of these green tiles, you place it somewhere on the board. Greenery tiles have to be placed next to one of a tile that you own, but right here we don't have any tiles on the board yet, so we could just place a greenery tile and then place a cube on the greenery tile showing that we control it. Now when you place a greenery tile, you also get to increase the oxygen by 1 step because you're putting more plants on the planet that will increase the oxygen. When you increase oxygen, you get to increase your TR rating by 1. As a general rule, anytime you increase on this track, or anytime you place down one of those tiles, you get to increase your TR rating and get more points at the end of the game. So now that we've briefly discussed placing tiles on the board, let's get a little bit more in depth about what happens when you place tiles and some of the restrictions for placing on the board. The first thing that you want to note is that when placing a tile on the board, whether it be an ocean tile, a city tile, or a greenery tile, there are all these little symbols on the board, and these are placement bonuses, meaning that when you place a tile on these spaces, you're going to get these bonuses to use. So for instance, if I were to place a city tile on this space of the board, I would get to take 2 steel that I could instantly use later in the round. So I would take 2 of these little cubes, and then I would place them in my steel reserves on my player board. I could then use those steel to do certain things throughout the round. The next thing that you want to note is that when you place a tile, you take one of your player cubes and place it on top of the tile. That shows that you have control of that tile. So when you're placing tiles on the board, there are going to be a few restrictions. When you place greenery tiles, like I said earlier, you have to place them next to a tile that you control if possible. So in the instance where I've already put down this city tile, I would have to place a greenery tile next to this tile if I wanted to. Now, I would also get any placement bonuses from that spot, but you have to place adjacent to tiles that you control if you're placing a greenery tile. But once you place a greenery tile, you get to increase the oxygen, increase your TR rating, so that's a great tile to place. Another thing to note is that when placing a city tile down, they don't give you an initial bonus, not unless you build them from the standard projects. That would give you an increase of your mega credit rating. But just in general, if you are playing a city tile from a card, a lot of times they won't give you an initial bonus. But at the end of the game, each city tile is going to be worth a victory point for every greenery tile that surrounds it. Now, it doesn't matter if you control the greenery tiles or if other players control the greenery tiles. As long as there are greenery tiles next to your city, they're going to be worth that many victory points at the end of the game. So this city, for instance, would be worth 1, 2, 3 victory points at the end of the game. Even if this tile was controlled by blue and this tile was controlled by yellow, they would give us points. The next tile that you can place out on the board are these ocean tiles. Now, these ocean tiles have to be placed within these blue shaded areas on the game board. You're going to see, if you're counting, that there are more spaces on the game board than there are ocean tiles. There are more than 9 spaces that are reserved for ocean tiles. And the reason for that is that there are certain cards throughout the deck that will say, place this greenery tile or this special tile on a space reserved for ocean tiles. So there are more spaces on the board than there are ocean tiles, but what you would do is you would take an ocean tile, place it somewhere on the board, you could still get the placement bonus, and then you increase your TR rating by 1 when you place the ocean tile. Now the nice thing about ocean tiles is if there are ocean tiles already on the board, any new tiles that you place next to them will give you a bonus of 2 mega credits whenever you place next to them. So for instance, if I built a city right here next to these 2 ocean tiles, I would get 4 mega credits instantly from building next to those. And you can build cities wherever you want to on the board. They are not, they don't have the restriction that they have to be adjacent like the greenery tiles do. So you can be a little bit more flexible with cities. And the ocean tiles, other than giving you that 2 mega credit bonus and giving you an increase in your TR rating, they are mainly, that's the only bonus they give. They also trigger the end of the game whenever all of the ocean tiles are placed out and all the tracks are maxed as well. Alright, so the first thing that's going to happen at the end of the round is there is going to be a production phase. What will happen in the production phase is before anything is produced, you're going to take any energy cubes and they're going to convert into heat. So you're going to move those energy cubes from that box to that box, and the next round you'll have more heat that you can spend. Then you are going to produce resources in each one of these boxes that you have. So for instance, in the steel box I would get to put 2 cubes because my production is 2. I would get to put 1 titanium in there because I have 1 production of that. I would get to place 3 greenery or 3 plants because I have 1 of those. I would get to place 1 energy because I have 1 production in that. And then I would get to place 2 more heat in this box over here because my production of that is also 2. Now for mega credits over here, what we're going to do is we're going to take our TR rating, which mine right now is currently 22. We are then going to add or subtract our mega credit production, and that's what we get for the round. So for me, I've got 22 TR rating and 3 mega credit production, which means that I'm going to get 25 mega credits that I can then use in the next round. The last thing that you'll do in the production phase is you'll take any of your player cubes off of blue cards to show that they can be used again in the next round. Alright, so now that we've talked about production, we get to have our first player order phase. What will happen is this first player marker will pass the player to our left, and we will then increase the round marker by 1, showing that we've completed a generation. The next thing that's going to happen is our first research phase. What we get to do is each player gets to draw 4 cards off the top of the deck, and then you get to potentially purchase these new cards and put them into your hand. You get to look at the 4 cards that you draw, and any cards that you like and want to keep, you have to pay 3 mega credits for. And those mega credits come out of the production from your previous round. So for instance, if I wanted to keep these 2 cards, I would discard these 2 face down over next to the deck, and then I would have to pay 6 mega credits from the production that I just had. So I could take this right here, put it over here, and then get 4 back. And then for the next round, I would have these 2 cards in my hand, but I would only have this much to spend. So you have to be careful how many cards you buy because they're going to cost you from your production from the previous round. One quick thing I want to mention that I didn't necessarily touch on earlier is that steel and titanium have kind of a special use in the game. They will allow you to discount the costs of certain cards. So you can see on your player board that there are these little tag symbols right here. What this means is that you can spend 1 cube of steel and or titanium to discount the cost of cards that have these symbols in the top right of the card. So for instance, if I was looking at this card right here, I would be able to spend 1 titanium cube to discount this card's cost by 3 for every cube that I spend. So in this instance, I could spend this titanium cube and make this card cost 28 instead of 31 mega credits. The other thing that you can do is you can spend steel to discount cards that have this symbol in the top right. For every steel cube that you spend, you could discount the card by 2 mega credits. So in this instance, I could spend these 4 cubes to make this card cost 12 mega credits to play. So steel and titanium can really help you out in getting some really expensive cards to the table. Alright, we've talked about really everything that there is in the game. The last thing to discuss is final scoring. What happens is at the end of the game, whenever these 2 tracks have been maxed out and all 9 ocean tiles have been placed on the board, the end of the game triggers. What will happen is all players will finish out their current generation, and then you'll have one more production phase that will give you a chance to convert any remaining greenery or plants into greenery tiles on the board. And then you'll score at the end of the game based on the board state and how many cards you've played. At the end of the game, you're going to score points for a number of different things. Number one, you're going to add your TR rating. That's the starting score. So you would take whatever that is and start to add points on top of that. So we have 22 right here. The next thing that you'll score is awards. So any awards that have been funded will score based on whoever has the most points. So if you have the most tiles that you control, for instance, and that award has been funded, you'd get 5 victory points and you would add that onto your TR rating. And you may win any number of awards, and that will give you points. You'll also add points from any milestones that you have claimed. And once again, up to 3 of these 5 milestones can be claimed. And for each one of these milestones, you're going to get 5 points that you control. You're also going to get points from the tiles that are out on the map. For each greenery tile that you control, you'll get a point. So these will each be worth something at the end of the game. In addition, you're also going to get points for every city tile that you control. You're going to get points, once again, like we discussed earlier, for every greenery tile that's around it, whether you control that or not. So in this instance, let's just say that I controlled all 3 of these greenery tiles and I controlled this city. I would get 1, 2, 3 points for those greenery tiles, and then 3 points for this city because it was surrounded by 3 greenery tiles, for a total of 6 points to add on to my score. And then you're also going to get points for your cards. Now, if you can see on a lot of these cards, there's this little symbol down in the bottom right. This means that these cards will score you victory points at the end of the game. Now, these 2 are pretty simple and straightforward. They just give you 2 and 1 point respectively. These cards right here kind of have special conditions. This one says that every time a city tile is placed on the board, you get to add a cube to this card. And at the end of the game, for every 2 cubes on this card, you get a point. This one was the one that we looked at earlier that allows us to add a cube to the card. And at the end of the game, the card is worth a point for every cube that's on it. So you'll add up all of the different cards that you have in front of you that will give you certain points, and you'll have a lot. Every time I've played this game, there are a lot of cards played in front of each player. And once you have that total, that's your point total. Whoever has the highest points wins the game and becomes the most successful corporation in terraforming the planet of Mars. Alright, I'm so glad that you guys stuck around, and I hope this video was helpful. I hope it taught you how to play the game and kind of answered any questions that might come up. If you do have questions, you can email me at thedicey@gmail.com. You can also comment on this video, and I'll try and respond as quickly as possible. But if you get a chance, come by and see me at BGGCon this year, 2016. I'll be working at the Stronghold Games booth, possibly demoing this game. So if you want to come by and see how it works, get to play with me, come on by and say hi. I hope that you enjoyed the content, and until next time, we'll see you at the table.